Hey y'all, Dana Stokes here, and I'm at one of my favorite places, Pawleys Island, South Carolina, here at the Seaview Inn, and we are talking today with Mayor Brian Henry. Brian, it's been a long time since we've been together like this, just kind of catching up, and a lot has gone on since we last spoke.
So sure has.
Let's take a little bit of time and fill everybody in on what's been happening around here.
For sure. It's been since November since we've sat.
I know, a lot has happened.
A lot has happened.
Yeah.
We've done a strategic planning session recently too.
All right, well, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the reason we wanted to have a strategic planning session is because we really want the town to be less reactive to budget matters and pending crises and get to a point where we can be more proactive and get a plan and kind of stay ahead of things. And that's really one of the main reasons we had it. But also, we just did a historic beach renourishment out here. And we don't really want to rest on our laurels. We want to figure out what's next. What do we want to do next? And if there's any major projects we want to undertake, how are we going to pay for that? That's a big question we have.
Have y'all done strategic planning efforts before? Is this something new?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't heard of one, but in my business background and things that I've done, it's real important to plan the next 5 to 10 years to make sure you can get ahead of things.
Okay. So who attended the meeting?
We had all town council members, myself, and the town administrator, Ryan Fabry, and also the chief of police, Mike Fanning. But rather than one of us or me trying to facilitate this discussion, we had two professional facilitators that came in and really kept things on task and kept us objective in our discussions.
So earlier when we were talking, Brian, you had mentioned something about a survey that was taken prior to the strategic planning meeting. Who was surveyed and what types of questions were presented on that survey?
Well, we did do a survey a few months prior. We had to reschedule our strategic planning session, but we felt like it was very important that we got feedback from the property owners and really wanted input and the voices of all our property owners to be heard. And secondly, we had a pretty good idea of what we felt like the top priorities are, but we wanted to make sure those aligned with what the property owners were thinking as well. But the good news is we got 265 responses to the survey, which is over half of the property owners. 50% of those responses came from the north end of the island. So that's where most of the full-time residents are. So their voices were well represented.
Right.
And also very encouraging was 60% of the surveys came from property owners that have owned on Pawleys Island for over 25 years. So certainly a passionate, well-informed contingent. We got hundreds of comments as well from people that just wanted their voice to be heard. Here's what I think is most important, whether it's a core issue or something that's just important to them. They wanted us to hear from it. That was a good avenue for that to happen.
So Brian, once y'all got all the information back from the surveys, what were some of the common threads, concerns from the homeowners?
Sure. Pawleys is a special place. I mean, people feel strongly about it. And amongst all the comments that we got, there were some common themes that came forward. And one of them was Pawleys is a very family-friendly place. And also people thought that it was extremely important that we protect the environment. Another thing that we heard is, hey, let's keep Pawleys peaceful.
Right.
Because it is a very peaceful kind of place where people come to unwind and relax and take it easy. And then we really felt like it was important that we maintain, the culture of Pawleys Island, which is pretty unique here. So those were some of the common threads that people gave to us and felt like were important. But more than anything, I think the feedback we got made us realize that we're really stewards of the island.
Absolutely.
And people look to us, and I believe it's our responsibility to protect this place for future generations.
Well, and just having the survey, knowing that everybody is in agreement with all of that, it helps add to the peace as well, right?
Hopefully we can get to that point.
So what were some of the top priorities that rose to the top?
Sure. There were 10 priorities that we listed on the survey, and each one of those were on there because really they're all important. But there were 4 priorities that really rose to the top. And the first, which you might have guessed, is to maintain this beach we have out here, especially after the historic renourishment that we just did. Creek and road flooding is a big one, and that's become more of a pervasive thing as far as road flooding. And then the creek silting and dredging. We get more and more sand, and we need to make sure the creek stays healthy and is navigable. And then lastly, the fourth one is, if we're going to do any of these projects or improve any of these things, keep the beaches up, keep the road from flooding, we're going to have funding from somewhere. So that's a big focus area for us.
So you just mentioned about the beach renourishment still being a top priority, but we just finished that. That was just completed in March of this year. So there are some people out there that might be wondering, Brian, why is it still a top priority?
Sure. That's a good question. And with the beach renourishment, we brought a historic amount of sand, 1.1 million cubic yards. We just had a storm roll through here that brought a really large, almost historic water rise as well. We need to make sure that we're monitoring how well this beach is holding up. How much sand did we lose during the storm? Coastal Science Engineering was recently out here 2 days after the storm measuring to see how much we lost. We need to do that not just after the storms, but every year to see how well is it holding up, so we can make a plan and stay ahead of this thing, because it's important to tourism and to all of us here that live in Pawleys.
The other priority you were talking about was the creek flooding.
Right.
Talk more about that.
Sure. Well, if you have property on Pawleys Island, you're getting more and more used to water rise flooding into the roads, either from heavy rains or from storm tides and such. But it's not just the flooding, it's the drainage. Once the water comes onto the road and the rain stops or the tide goes out, the water stays on the road. So we've got to make that a priority to figure out, like the drainage, for example. Let's pick the worst areas along the roadways, get a good engineered solution that's a repeatable solution, so that we can then do it on a grander scale and roll it out to the rest of the island.
Has drainage issues ever been addressed before on the roads?
It really has. It's a good point. And after the storm, SCDOT will come in and clean out the drains, but they clog right back up. So we need to do more. We need to have backflow preventers and have a more comprehensive solution to these things. But really pick a few areas that have been the worst offenders over the years, get those right, and say, hey, here's some quick wins, here's what we can do, and then we can roll it out to the others. But one other thing I wanted to mention, that's kind of a fix, but we also need to figure out how to stem the tide from flooding the roads in general, just from king tides.
Right.
What are some of the ways that we can, and all these things are expensive, but they can be done with the right approach.
So Brian, what can be done in terms of creek silting?
Well, it's been attempted in the past, and it's an important issue. Obviously, we've got to keep the creek navigable and healthy. When it's been done in the past, there's been debris from Hurricane Hugo that's still out there, whether it be some remnants of creek docks or houses. So it's been done before. But what we need to probably do is identify areas that are most, I guess, compromised in terms of the south end and even on the north end. What are the worst areas? And let's do some studies to figure out how we can fix those. Maybe start getting the permitting done now, because it takes a long time to do that. And if we can get a few areas fixed and get the permits, then maybe we can address the creek as a whole. But to try to hit it all at once may be difficult, for sure.
Well, funding is a huge topic. What are some of your thoughts or ideas that came out of this meeting as far as funding some of these bigger projects?
That's a good question, and that was probably what we spent most of the time talking about at strategic planning. We talked about a lot of ideas. We didn't agree on any per se, but one thing we do agree on is trying to get $10 million in 10 years. How do we get there? That sounds like a tall task, but there's ways to do it. One of the ways we talked about, which has been taboo, is a property tax. It's a fair and equitable way to do it. It's been discussed in the past. We take some legislation to be able to do it. But if you're willing to pay a few $100s a year to maintain this beach and hopefully do some of the things that we just talked about, it's going to take a sacrifice at some level and make some tough decisions as a town council to bring that kind of money in.
Well, what about considering grants, assessments, those types of options?
Sure. Well, a grant allowed us to put $7 million towards our funds to be able to nourish the beach. So grants are certainly something that we're looking at. Additionally, we've considered the idea of an assessment. And the way that works is we would borrow money for a very specific project and then assess the property owners to pay that back over time. Another unique idea, or at least possibility, is something called what we'll call the Pawleys Island Preservation Fund. And just like universities, this would be a donation type deal, because people care about the island. They may want to, after someone passes, they may want to leave a gift to the island. And this fund would have a very specific charter, sort of like the Bunnell Foundation. And we think that's a very viable alternative as well.
So it wouldn't necessarily have to be left by a property owner, but just anybody who has vacationed here, where Pawleys is a special
Cares
place
about
to
the
them and really
island.
cares about it.
Sure. There's other
Can do
mechanisms
that.
too, tax mechanisms that you can use to give and help out the island and protect it for the future. Just another thought, because parking on the island, there's so much more pressure
Right.
on the island for parking. There's so many more people moving here, and people who move here, they say, I'm moving to the beach. And so when they say they move to the beach, they want to be able to come to the island, they want to have parking. So we're now starting to have the conversation about a parking fee on the island. And I know it's been taboo in the past, and we want to be family friendly, but at the same time, we need to solve our budget issues too.
So Brian, it sounds like y'all got a good grip, from the surveys and the meetings of what the top priorities are for the residents here of Pawleys Island and all those who care deeply about the island. What are some of the other concerns that are on your mind but maybe didn't quite make it to the top four?
We talked briefly about parking. That's a huge issue here. It didn't make the necessarily top four, but it's certainly really
It's
important
on
for us to
everybody's.
solve that.
It's a
Absolutely.
concern for everybody.
It absolutely is. Another one is police coverage. The police make up over 50% of the town's budget for the year. We want to make sure we're optimizing the coverage and the utilization compared to the budget and all of those things. And Chief Fanning and his crew do a great job. We wanted to
they
look at that
do.
some more. Recycling is being done, but it's not being done well. We need to take a close look at that. The North End Jetty is really what protects the north end of the island. It's been there a long, long time. How's it holding up? Do we need to do anything about it? And then lastly, we want to create more of a sense of community for Pawleys Island, for the property owners, for the residents. And just a couple of weeks ago, we created an events committee. And their job is going to be to do some regular events, some annual events, to bring everybody together, to get more use out of the nature park and such like that. So the top priorities, the priorities I just mentioned, it's a lot. But if we plan it, which is why we had the planning session, I think we can do it. We just need to have the right plan of
absolutely.
attack.
So Brian, I know a lot of times after these meetings and surveys, they're kind of twofold. You want to know what you're doing well, but also we kind of want to know what the residents are thinking might not be going quite so well. And so what are those thoughts and what kind of arose out of that?
Sure. First of all, the survey and the residents told us that we are doing a good job of controlling operating costs and managing the budget. Also told us that we're communicating well, which is something you want to do well. You want to be transparent as a government. So we feel good about those things. But what they did tell us, and what I certainly agree with, is that we need to do a much better job working with, coordinating with local, county, state, and federal agencies. Ryan Fabry does a really good job, and we just need to take it to another level there. And then lastly, myself, town council, town administrator, we need to be a cohesive team and move forward together. And I think we're doing that. I think we could do better. And I think it's important for everyone to see that we're all working together.
Brian, it's been a pleasure being here with you again in this beautiful setting on this beautiful island. And we've done a lot of discussion here today about what's been going on, but what's next?
Well, we've got some aggressive goals and I think some things in front of us that we will certainly work hard on. But I believe firmly that we don't want to go and create committees for each one of these priorities that we have. We don't want to create a finance committee or a flooding
Creek silting
committee. Yeah,
committee.
we don't need committees. We need to take ownership as town council for each one of these. And I believe each one of these priorities needs a goal champion, a member of town council that takes ownership of it, gives updates frequently at our town council meetings, and we need to keep those items on our agenda. So they're out front, they're on our dashboard, and we can take a look at them and make sure that we're addressing each one of those because they are important.
Well, and like I said, there's a lot of information that's been covered here today. You may want to get some more information or read more in depth some of the reports that have come out about some of the issues that we've been talking about today. How can everybody get more information?
Sure. Well, we're going to send out an email to all of our property owners, and this video will obviously be attached to that, but there will also be about an 8-page report that gives all of the details that we just spoke about from the strategic planning session. There'll also be, the town of Pawleys Island is always a great resource to go get more information and updates on what we're working on and hurricanes, etc. And then social media, we'll certainly post updates on Facebook and whatnot.
Very good. It's nice being with you again.
Well, awesome being with you. I really appreciate you
Look,
taking
the
the time.
dolphins are back.